Hey, everybody, welcome to Tip of the Spear. And as always, we're trying to bring the best voices out there to give us the clearest picture of what's going on in the world, not only from a biblical perspective, but a prophetic perspective, a geopolitical perspective. And today I'm excited because I have my good friend Yoram Ettinger. I had just interviewed him back in January when I was in Israel, and we were able to get him on the broadcast today. If you don't know Yoram Ettinger, you need to follow him. He is a veteran Israeli diplomat. He's a researcher, columnist. He's got over 40 years of experience in U.S. Israeli relationships and Middle Eastern affairs. So, I mean, we're talking about an expert, guys. He knows what's going on. He has huge insights that we're going to tap into today. He knows what's going on the ground. He knows about policy briefings to the U.S. and Israeli leaders. And he's the founder of the Ettinger Report. And that's what you want to make sure that you plug into and listen to him, because he's got great insight. So, Yoram, thanks for joining us today from Israel.
Well, thank you very much. It's my pleasure, and more so it's my privilege to be considered your friend and to be on your show.
Yeah, no, we're excited. And I want to dive right in because a lot of our audience, in the U.S., we don't get a good or clear perspective on what's going on the ground in Israel. We got CNN, MSLSD, and all these other crazy wacko media outlets. They never tell the true story. So what our audience is wanting to know, Yoram, is tell us a little bit on updates as far as what's going on in Gaza with Hamas and Hezbollah in the north.
Well, since October 7, 2023, Israel has been fighting on a few fronts simultaneously. Gaza, Lebanon, Iran, Yemen, and Iranian-controlled terrorists from Syria and Iraq, as well as terrorism coming from Judea and Samaria. This is not only Israel's own war. We are fighting today Hamas in Gaza. Hamas is a branch of the Muslim Brotherhood, which since 1928 has been driven by a vision to bring the Western infidel to submission, with a particular emphasis on the United States. We fight Hamas, which views us, and rightly so, as the vanguard of the United States in the Middle East. They consider Israel to be the most effective outpost of the U.S. in the Middle East, and likewise Hezbollah. And although Hamas is a Sunni Muslim terror organization and Hezbollah is a Shiite Muslim terrorist organizations, both consider their top priority not only to bring down every single pro-U.S. Arab regime in the Middle East, but also to bring the U.S., what they call the infidel U.S., to submission. Both Hamas and Hezbollah happen to be proxies of the Ayatollah regime in Iran. And in fact, the Ayatollah regime in Iran has fulfilled the role of a most venomous octopus centered in Tehran, Iran, with its arms spread not only throughout the Persian Gulf and the Middle East and Africa, but all the way to South America, Central America, U.S.-Mexico border, and U.S. soil itself. And that underlines the fact that U.S. and Israel have a mutual threat, and that threat is headed by the Ayatollahs of Iran. And maybe one more point, some people assume that the Ayatollahs of Iran, as is the case with Hamas and Hezbollah, are Israel's problem. The fact is that if you were to eliminate Israel altogether from the map of the Middle East, the Ayatollahs of Iran would still adhere to their own fanatic 1400-year-old vision, which goes
Right.
back to 680, and they commemorate every year. They commemorate that battle called the Battle of Karbala, which has shaped their vision, mandating them to topple what they call the treacherous Sunni Arab regimes, which happen to be the pro-American Arab regimes, and again bring the Western infidel and especially the great American Satan to submission. They would have followed that vision with or without Israel. Israel is not the centerpiece of their vision, but as far as they are concerned, they view Israel as the first line of defense of Western democracies.
Yeah.
They assume, and rightly so, that the weaker is Israel, the easier it is for them to hit the West, and therefore they're trying to take Israel down. So far, it has not worked in their favor. Hezbollah in Lebanon is still around, but much weaker than it was when the war started. So is the case of Hamas, and so is the case of the Ayatollahs of Iran. And quite frankly, the question is the U.S. going to seize that opportunity of dramatically weakened Ayatollahs of Iran to take care of that head of the anti-American venomous octopus?
Yeah, yeah. And I want to get into Iran. I want to get into your opinion about the Ayatollahs, about the regime there. Let me ask you this, because a lot of people are asking me about the hostage situation going on in Gaza. What's the latest on that one, Yoram?
Well, this is a pretty, I would say, horrific
Yeah.
challenge facing the leaders of Israel. And I'll be very transparent and very fully honest with you. The horrific challenge is a result of the fact that on the one hand, you have the very tragic state of affairs for the hostages in Gaza at this stage, 59 of them, some of them alive, some of them were murdered. But at the same time, there is also the issue of the national security of the country of Israel as a whole. And the challenge facing the Israeli government is to establish and bolster Israel's posture of deterrence, which was literally demolished on October 7, 2023. In the Middle East, which is the wildest, most conflict-ridden, intolerant region anywhere in the world, posture of deterrence constitute the number one component element of national security. Erosion of national security may be a death sentence for any tenant in this neighborhood. And since October 7, we have done our utmost to reclaim posture of deterrence. My own assessment is that Israel's posture of deterrence at this stage is even more effective than it was before October 7. However, it is preconditioned upon Israel obliterating the threat of Hamas.
Yeah.
What Hamas expects Israel to do is to end that war while Hamas remains in Gaza in return for the Israeli hostages.
Yeah.
Undoubtedly, this is the most humane goal facing today the Israeli government.
Yeah.
But the question is, can we afford to take the future of the 59 hostages, their families, and many, many friends, and consider it more important than the national security of the country as a whole. It's a very cruel, very tormenting decision to make, but we have to learn, I believe, from mistakes. In the past, we went through few cycles of releasing Israeli hostages, and the result was unprecedented terrorists haunting Israel. And we are talking, therefore, about, on the one hand, freeing the 59 hostages, but on the other hand, or at the same time, this could also lead to death sentence to hundreds or maybe thousands of Israelis. I wouldn't want to be in the seat of our own prime minister who has to make such type of decision. What should be the right step to take? The intent of Israel at this stage is to release the hostages through military pressure on Hamas, through hopefully eliminating Hamas. But again, we have to remember, any arrangement, any settlement, any accord which would leave behind Hamas in Gaza would be considered as a historic victory for Islamic terrorism. And that would not only create ripple effects as far as Israel is concerned. A major victory to Islamic terrorism could undermine severely the stability of Saudi Arabia and Jordan and Egypt and the United Arab Emirates and other Arab allies of the U.S. There is no doubt a historic victory for Islamic terrorism would provide robust tailwind to anti-American terrorism. And the Middle East, as you know, has been the chief epicenter of anti-American, Iranian-supported Islamic terrorism, increasingly on U.S. soil itself.
That's right. That's right. You're making a good point. I wouldn't want to be in Netanyahu's shoes in making that decision, because the last time I talked to you, Yoram, this was back in January, that part of the hostage deal was that Israel had to release basically terrorists out of their own prison, and those terrorists would go back into like Judea and Samaria and other places. Is that happening, and is Israel watching where these guys got released? Because that would be a national security threat of releasing these terrorists. I just remember historically that was one of the prisoner exchange one time was they released Yahya Sinwar in that. So tell us what's going on with that one.
Well, we have had number of terrorist releases in order to get most of the hostages which have been released. And undoubtedly, as you correctly suggested, most of them are going back to terrorism, but they're going back to terrorism with much more experience. While in Israeli prison, they, to their own so-called credit, they have learned a lot about Israel, which would make their terrorist acts against Israel that much more effective. Sure. And we have learned from prior such transactions, releasing number of terrorists in return for own hostages, that exactly is the decision which plays into the hands of terrorists. And the question is, will Israel learn from prior experience by repeating mistakes or refraining or avoiding mistakes? And obviously, each one of us wants all the hostages back. The question is, at what price?
Right, exactly. And so it's a tough situation that Israel's in, with national security issues of releasing terrorists and then wanting the hostage back. Israel's between a rock and a hard place, no doubt about that.
Well,
So, yeah, go
there's
ahead.
no doubt, but we should also remember, as you know very well, every Israeli youngster serves in the Israeli military.
Yeah,
And we all know that once you enroll in the Israeli military, you are going to face life-threatening instances. What
right.
are we going to do? Are we going to stop enlisting Israelis to serve in the military because we are sending them uh, to life-threatening situations? Obviously, we should face reality as it is. And reality everywhere, but especially in the Middle East, is there are no free lunches.
Yeah,
And the reality of a Jewish state is, if we want, then we must realize that investing blood, sweat, and tear is part of that reality. And happily, or I would say luckily, for Israel, when you watch the young people, reservists and regular soldiers, talking about 18 through 45, 50-year-old people
yeah,
serving in this war, which has been going on since October 2003, the spirit is very, very high. And
good.
it's very high because those soldiers are aware of the purpose which they serve. And I must admit that I myself almost gave up on
Mm,
our younger generation because
wow.
of uh, their adhering to the cell phone culture
Yeah,
and removing themselves to an extent from Jewish history, Israeli history, but the way they have performed in that war has proven me absolutely wrong. And it's not only the way they fight, but every day we have multitude of interviews with soldiers, and to listen to them telling the media people who, just like in the US, tend to be cynic, tend to
yeah,
be very, very removed from history, from tradition. And here you have the young people, in a way, educating their interviewers on the purpose of the war. They don't
amen.
talk about their own lives. They don't even talk only about their families. They talk about their mission to protect the Jewish people in Israel, the Jewish people worldwide. They're talking about them fighting in order to preserve the Jewish legacy of the last 3,500 years. And when one listens, one is uh, astounded. Did they get it on TikTok? Where did they get exactly that type of sense of mission? Uh, Possibly it's in the genes.
Yeah,
Possibly it's in Jewish genes, Jewish legacy, Jewish history. We just celebrated Passover, about the
yeah,
time that you celebrated Easter.
yeah,
And when you retell the story of Passover every single year with the entire wide family around the table, you entrench that legacy,
yeah.
which has, in my mind, molded our military in a most superb manner.
It's funny you mentioned that the because we've noticed that too, being on the ground, and you know that we support several units, and we have seen that same fervor for Israel and from the young troops that we have come in contact with. Yoram, correct me if I'm wrong, but I read something on, I think it was JNS or something, I can't remember, but it was saying that there is a movement among the young people towards conservatism now and being more religious. Is that true?
I would say to an extent. I
Okay.
would not blow it out of proportion, but we have had few cases. In fact, a few of the released hostages who publicly attributed their capacity to withstand the time spent in Hamas dungeon. They attributed to them discovering what faith is all about. And again, this is the story of real life. Real life is when you are down, you find out very, very hidden powers. And those hidden powers have to do with faith. And how can you be but a faithful person when you watch the Jewish people overall and the Jewish state in particular functioning as it is today against the backdrop of 35-year-old animosity by many, many major powers in the world, destruction of the homeland, destruction of Jerusalem and the temple, expulsion, pogroms, burning Jewish communities alive. Right. And here we are. And when I say here we are a very, very close partner to the U.S. And who would have thought only 77 years ago when Israel was established, and in a few days we will celebrate Israel's 77th Independence Day, who would have thought that in 77 years, Israel is going to become the number one partner of the U.S. in the development of unmanned aerial vehicles, in the development of defense against ballistic missiles. And who would have thought that the U.S. Air Force would find conducting joint exercises with the Israeli Air Force as a most effective way for the U.S. Air Force to excel on its battle tactics. We have gone a long way, and in my mind, it has to do with faith. It has to do with sticking to legacy. And generally speaking, whether you are secular or religious, there is nothing better as far as planning our future than dwelling on the past. And the past has to do, in many, many respects, the biblical past, the Judeo-Christian values, which have made the U.S. the great country which it is, and which has brought back to life the Jewish state.
Yeah. You know, I want you to speak on that, Yoram, about this connection between Israel and the U.S., because as a pastor, I'm coming from a religious background, and I'm on the same page when I'm in Israel. I'm on the same page as you. I'm on the same page. We have the same values, the Judeo-Christian values, you know, the law of Moses, the Ten Commandments. I mean, that's the foundation for America. It's the foundation, obviously, for Israel. And so we share that common bond that unites us. And then spiritually speaking, I mean, when we watch what's happening over the history of what happened to the Jews, it is remarkable how God has sustained them, they have survived. It is an absolute miracle in front of our eyes as Americans to watch Israel get reestablished as a nation in 1948. And to us, it's prophetic. And so we see that. But here's what I want you to speak on. I want you to speak on the geopolitical importance of Israel for the United States in the Middle East. You touched on it a little bit, but I want our audience to know the political reasons why it's important to have Israel as a vanguard in the Middle East.
Well, I can refer back to the late General Alexander Haig, who was Supreme Commander of NATO and then Secretary of State in the United States. He was one of the most enthusiastic supporters of enhanced U.S. Israel strategic cooperation. And when he was asked, how come you're so hot on cooperation with Israel, he had a standard response. He said that the Jewish state is the largest American aircraft carrier, which does not require a single American on board, which cannot be sunk, located in the most critical region of the world between Asia and Europe and Africa, between the Mediterranean, the Red Sea, the Indian Ocean, and the Persian Gulf, in the area which harbors some 48% of global oil reserve, area which is the epicenter of anti-Western, anti-US Islamic terrorism. And if there would not be an Israel with its military capabilities in that region, then the US would have to manufacture and deploy few more real aircraft carriers,
True.
deploy them to the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean, accompanied by a few ground divisions, all of which would have cost to manufacture, deploy, and maintain between $15 and $20 billion annually, all of which is spared to the US taxpayer by this Jewish state. And one could compare that to what is erroneously called foreign aid, $3.8 billion. If Alexander Haig is correct, and I assume that he was correct, we're talking right there on something like 500% rate of return on that American annual investment of $3.8 billion. But more than that, the U.S., for its own reasons, wants to minimize its military presence in the Middle East. But the U.S. cannot ignore the significance of the region, and therefore for the U.S. to reduce the military presence would leave void behind. And the question is, who is going to fill that void? Now, the U.S. cannot rely on NATO because NATO lost long time ago its will and its capabilities to flex effective muscle. They cannot rely on any Arab country because every single pro-American Arab regime has the machetes of the Ayatollahs of Iran and the Muslim Brotherhood at their throat. It's only the Jewish state which can fill in that void. And therefore, when the U.S. receives, by the way, with much, much, much gratitude, the best of the American military systems, we receive it. But it serves American interests, not only protecting American interests in the Middle East, but enabling the U.S. to minimize its military presence in the Middle East. Moreover, the U.S. has its own set of Arab allies. For instance, the Hashemite regime in Jordan, which is highly, highly vulnerable, haunted by the Ayatollahs of Iran, by the Muslim Brotherhood, by Palestinian terrorists, by Syrian and Iraqi terrorists. And Israel has been for years now the first line of defense of the Hashemite regime of Jordan. By the way, not only militarily, Jordan today is home for some 2 million Syrian refugees resulting from the Syrian civil war. Those 2 million refugees center in northern Jordan. Potentially, they could become a volcano, destroying the country of Jordan. Israel has undertaken to provide them with all their water needs. We provide it free of charge. This is part of a U.S.-Jordan-Israeli agreement. And by the way, that also tells us something about the capabilities of Israel. Here we provide water for 2 million refugees in Jordan at a time when, as you know, there is less and less natural rainfall here in our part of the world. This year has been very, very, we have had very sparse quantity of rain. At the same time, again, as you know, we have benefited from a very, very high level fertility rate in
Yeah.
Israel. More
Yeah.
and more children are born in Israel, but at the same time, we have the highest ever water reserves in the
Mm,
country. And the question, how can Israel have higher water reserve today than we had in the past when there is less rain and many, many more births in Israel? It
right.
has to do with the challenges yielding innovations. We had to resort to, I would call it, supernatural or unnatural ways of getting water, desalination of
Yeah.
Mediterranean water, recycling of sewage, and more recently, transforming air into water. And all
Wow.
that has yielded very, very substantial water reserves in Israel, which, by the way, we have shared with many African countries,
Mm,
which many of them suffer from a very arid land type of conditions, and we have provided them with the technologies to make and needs to get the water which they require.
you know that you're making a good point about that, how innovative Israel is, and you know, we owe Israel here in California, where I'm at, a debt of gratitude because our drip system was invented by the Israelis. And so we brought the drip system over to our crops, and we used to flood irrigate, but now because of our water problems, we now use the Israeli drip system here in California. So you guys are always on the cutting edge of innovation. There's no doubt about that. And so since we're talking about Israeli and American ties, help us understand the transition now that we've went from the Biden regime that was slow walking armaments to Israel, wouldn't give them the bunker busters, to now Trump's in. And we know that Trump's very pro-Israel. Have you seen a difference in the different administration now?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the key, in my mind, the key to the dramatic, not somewhat, but dramatic change has to do with the fact that just like Trump's first administration, so it continues in this administration with Trump literally evicting, expelling the State Department from the
Yeah.
center stage of shaping international or foreign policy, national security policy.
Yeah.
The State Department has been wrong and wronger and wrongest on Middle East affairs, probably on most issues throughout
Yeah.
the world. And President Trump has decided long time ago to make the State Department a secondary or tertiary element in shaping his foreign and national security policy. And at the same time, the president has also made it clear that he does not see the UN as a productive partner for the US, contrary to the Biden administration,
Yeah.
especially Secretary Blinken, who who was eager to develop shared policy with the UN, with international organizations. And as we know, the UN sadly has been anti-Western institution. That most international organizations have likewise been anti-Western, anti-US, and
Yeah.
anti-Israel. So that by itself has brought about very, very energizing element to U.S. Israel relations. In addition, as far as President Trump is concerned, his view of the world makes it very clear division between the forces of good and the forces of evil. He has historically considered Israel to be part of the positive part of the world and the terrorist, Muslim terrorist part of the negative part of the world. And therefore, it has been very, very positive transition from the Biden to the Trump administration. There is one what I would call tough nut to crack, and this is the issue of Iran. On this issue, I don't see yet a common view by the Trump administration and Israel. President Trump, during his first administration, opposed regime change, and he embraced the economic sanctions policy towards Iran.
Right.
Obviously, economic sanctions is much better than the appeasement by Obama and Biden.
Right.
But as we know now, economic sanctions are reversible.
Yes.
Presidents in the U.S. don't last forever, and at the end of their term comes another tenant to the White House, and that tenant simply can lift, can suspend, can soften those economic sanctions, and therefore they are reversible.
Right.
Likewise with negotiation, the U.S. currently conducts negotiation with Iran. For the U.S., negotiation serves as a very vital tactic or element to produce reconciliation. Sadly, this is not the way the Ayatollahs of Iran or Hamas terrorists or Hezbollah terrorists consider negotiation. For them, as suggested by litany of precedents, negotiation constitute a time to recuperate from recent setback. It's a time for them to run down the clock, so to speak, which would enable the Ayatollahs to gain access to nuclear capability. For them, negotiation is a step to regroup, bolster capabilities, and get ready for the next offensive against the infidel West or the infidel Jew or the infidel Baha'i or the infidel Hindu. And therefore, while the U.S. keenly intend to exploit the option of negotiation in order to avoid war, the reality of the Middle East is if you want to minimize war, to minimize terrorism, you have to obliterate the chief epicenter of war and terrorism. And the chief epicenter since February 1979 has been the Ayatollah regime of Iran.
Yeah. No, you're making a good point. So, you know, I'm hearing you loud and clear. The only thing that needs to happen is we need regime change in Iran. And we also know that even the Iranians don't even like the Ayatollahs. And we hear there's an underground Christian church that's developing there. What about taking out Iran's nuclear installations? Is that, do you hear any rumors about that being an option?
Well, we are focused on Iran's potential nuclear capabilities, which is proper to an extent. Because today Iran's Ayatollahs do not possess nuclear capabilities, but they are the chief epicenter of war and terrorism throughout the globe, also on the American continent.
Yes.
Today, with conventional capabilities, they're threatening the survival of every single pro-American Arab regime. And just as an example, should they succeed, as they intend, should they succeed to topple the pro-American Hashemite regime in Jordan, this is going to transform Jordan into another podium, another form of anti-American Islamic terrorism, which could create ripple effects, trigger ripple effects into Saudi Arabia, into Egypt, into United Arab Emirates, again threatening the control of 78% of global oil reserves. And
Wow.
all that without nuclear capabilities.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
therefore, the focus on denying Iran nuclear capability should not be conducted or should not be done at the expense of making sure that the Ayatollahs of Iran do not have any capability to advance their goals. And the only way to do that is regime change.
Yeah.
I was in Washington last few weeks
Okay.
for a whole week, and I heard the term, there's no appetite for any military move leading to regime change. And
Oh,
first of
no.
all, I think it's very sad for national security to be conducted based on appetite. Appetite
Yeah.
is very tenuous. National security is a fixed element, is a critical element. But
Right.
more than that, as you mentioned, the vast majority of the Iranian population does not want the Ayatollah's regime, which is one of the most oppressive, despotic, ruthless, terrorist regime
Yeah.
anywhere in the world. When they hear the U.S., the number one military power of the world, stating we do not intend to flex our military muscle against the Ayatollahs, it is a major blow to the opposition inside Iran. It's a major blow to the human rights movement in Iran. But more than that, it ignores precedents. Some people may say external involvement does not bode well for regime change. In 1953, there was an anti-American, pro-Soviet Iranian Prime Minister Mossadegh, and Mossadegh was taken down by U.S. interference, which allowed the Shah of Iran, the pro-American Shah of Iran, to return to the helm in Iran. And it lasted from 53 until 78, 79, when an American president once again interfered, got involved in domestic affairs in Iran, and he decided, Jimmy Carter decided that the Shah of Iran was dictator, ruthless dictator, unfit for the job, and it was President Carter who basically paved the road for Ayatollah Khomeini to take over control of Tehran. So on two occasions, 53, 78, 79, it was American involvement which brought about regime change. And therefore, anyone who says external involvement does not deliver the goods on regime change, it's absolutely wrong. We also hear that the U.S. tried the regime change in Afghanistan and failed, tried the regime change in Iraq and failed. But that's a mistake to assume that that also means that a similar attempt is going to fail in Iran, because when it comes to Iran versus Afghanistan and Iraq, we're talking about two very different ethnic populations. We're talking about two very different levels of education. We're talking about very different ideologies. We're talking about the Iranian population, which has very high level education. In fact, some of the world best brains in the area of technology. Namely, once you bring down the regime of the Ayatollahs, there are a number of options inside Iran to assume control and run the country, unlike Afghanistan, unlike Iran. And more than that, there was no cohesive bloc, a huge bloc of Afghanis who wanted the regime change in Afghanistan. There was not a cohesive bloc in Iraq, but there is a dramatically large majority of Iranians who say enough is enough. We don't want the Ayatollahs anymore. And it could be a tragic mistake for the US to miss such an opportunity
Right.
when the Iranians do not have their, for instance, air defenses ready after it was hit by the Israelis at the time when their proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah, have been dealt very brutal blows. This is the time to take care of the head of the octopus and not dwell on, do we have appetite or don't we have appetite?
I totally agree with you, man. I think regime change needs to happen, and we have a window here because, like you said, Yoram, a president is only in there for 4 years, and Trump gets out. We don't know what to expect after Trump. We could get some crazy leftists, like a Bernie Sanders or Kamala Harris, and they would totally turn their back on Israel. So you're absolutely right. There's a window of opportunity here.
And it's not the issue of Israel. They're going to turn their back on America, because when you appease Iran, you appease the number one threat to America's homeland security and to American interests in Latin America, in the Middle East, in Africa. When you appease Islamic terrorism, you threaten the viability of Western democracies. Israel is part of it, but Israel should not be considered as the centerpiece of the battle against Iran or against Islamic terrorism.
Right, you're absolutely right. And you mentioned on a previous interview or a show that you were on, and I want you to talk about this a little bit, Yoram, that there are establishments of Iranian-supported terrorist cells on U.S. soil. And so what you're saying, hey, the threat's not just with Israel, it's to the West, it's to Americans. And that's why people need to start seeing the threat of Iran. It's like an octopus, like you say. And so, we've just went through 4 years of the Biden administration open borders, and we know that terrorists are coming through our borders. Kind of speak to that a little bit.
Well, it's not my own assessment or determination. The former head of the FBI under Biden testified 4 times on Capitol Hill from the end of 2023 through the end of 2024, twice in the House, twice in the Senate, in the Homeland Security committees, and in the appropriations subcommittees on Homeland Security. And in each one of his testimonies, he underscored the fact, according to his own FBI own assessment, that Iranian-supported anti-American Islamic terrorists have been inspired by the October 7th, 2023 offensive by Hamas to conduct similar acts on U.S. soil. And according to the former director of the FBI, Chris Wray, he also indicated that, in fact, Iran has already set large number of sleeper cells on U.S. soil, awaiting the Iranian command to carry out their mission. And according to him, again, the mission has to do eliminating number of top-ranking American officials, undermining the functioning of major American installations. And by the way, the Ayatollahs of Iran have developed very close ties with the drug cartels of Mexico and Bolivia and Colombia and Ecuador and Brazil, especially those in Mexico. They've provided the drug cartels of Mexico with the equipment to construct underground tunnels between Mexico and the USA. They have provided them and Venezuela with Predator unmanned aerial vehicles, which then the Ayatollahs of Iran have sold to Russia and the Houthi terrorists in Yemen. So we're talking about a real Ayatollahs offensive against the U.S., all of which, by the way, is in accordance with their own fanatic vision, with their own hate education, with their own weekly sermons in the mosque on Friday, and with their own official media. This is not speculations about what do they plan to do. This has been the track record of the Ayatollahs of Iran.
Wow. Yoram, I'm running out of time, my friend. I've kept you too long. I could go on for hours because you're just full of great information. If someone hasn't tapped into your social media, how do they find you, Yoram?
Well, as you mentioned before, I have my own website, which is www. And in one word, the EttingerReport.com, Ettinger with double T, and my own private email. And I encourage anyone who would like to communicate with me to do it via my email. It's yoramtex, YORAMTEX, @gmail.com. And I would welcome any feedback, especially any criticism, any different opinion, which would be very constructive feedback for me.
Well, folks, there you go. You can contact him directly. Yoram, that's why we appreciate you, man. You are on the cutting edge of the information out there, and we don't get this kind of information in the States. So we definitely appreciate what you're doing. And I just encourage everybody to follow your information, the Ettinger Report, and you're providing that for us. Thank you so much for what you're doing. And I'm hoping to be in Israel maybe in October, and maybe we can connect over there like we did before. And again, thank you for all you're doing. I appreciate your time, and we look forward to talking to you again. Thank you so much,
and Pastor Brandon, thank you especially for standing up with Israel. And nobody takes it for granted. And we view that as an act which has adrenalized our veins, for which we're very grateful.
Amen. We're with you all the way, man. And we're going to continue to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, as Scripture mentions. So thank you so much. And thank you. You betcha. Thank you so much for tuning in. And like we ended it, pray for the peace of Israel. And tune in to Yoram, tune in to our next broadcast as we try to bring you what's going on in the world so you know it from a biblical perspective, a prophetic perspective, and a geopolitical perspective. God bless you guys. We'll see you next time. Hey everybody, I need your help, and I need your help in 3 different areas. First of all, I need your help on our channel. Our channel is working against an algorithm, and so we need you to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. And if you'll do that, that helps us get the message out to many people. It outdoes the algorithm that's working against us. So if you'll do those things, real simple, like, subscribe, hit the bell, it'll get our message out to as many people as possible. The second thing you could do to help us out is prayer. We get a lot of pushback online from not only human beings, but from the demonic realm as well. And so we need prayer. And so if you can pray for our ministry, that would greatly help us out. And third, it takes a lot of financial resources to put these programs on. And so we do a lot of filming, with a lot of editing, a lot of going on location. In fact, sometimes we film in Israel. And we film in Turkey and different places like that. And so it takes a lot of money to do these special programs that we put together. And so we need finances. And so if the Lord puts it on your heart to help us, that would be greatly appreciated by us in our ministry. So those are the 3 ways you can help us. Pray to the Lord how you could do that. Real easy. Like, subscribe, hit the bell, pray, and financially support us. God bless you. Thank you so much.